It began in the bustling city of Chicago, Illinois in 2015. A wave of crimes had shaken the community. Banks were robbed in broad daylight, armored trucks ambushed, and convenience stores left in flames after midnight raids. The violence was swift and merciless. Families were torn apart and the city lived in fear. At the center of it all was a shadowy figure the press later called the Ghost. His real name, Samuel Okoro. He wasn't a street thug or a petty criminal. Samuel was something far more dangerous. He was an ex-mercenary with years of military training, fluent in survival tactics, and hardened by the battlefields of Africa. Samuel had once been a soldier. But after deserting, he vanished into the criminal underworld, carrying his skills into a life of greed and bloodshed. By the time he arrived in the United States, he had forged new documents, adopted new names, and built a reputation as a man no one could catch. The FBI had been tracking him for months. Yet each time they closed in, he disappeared. He switched cars, changed safe houses, and used stolen identities with precision. He left no fingerprints, no phone trails, no witnesses who could live long enough to testify. Samuel Okoro had become the embodiment of his nickname, a ghost. But ghosts, no matter how cunning, always leave behind traces. The break came one night in Dallas. Samuel and his crew struck an armored truck. It was fast, brutal, and efficient. But in the chaos he dropped something small, something he never should have lost. A pendant, hand-carved, bearing the insignia of a West African peacekeeping unit. When the FBI recovered it, most agents dismissed it as meaningless. But one analyst dug deeper. That insignia wasn't common. It belonged to a specialized African task force, a unit trained for cross-border operations. The pendant was more than jewelry. It was a signature. And that discovery led the United States to reach out across the ocean. 5 soldiers arrived weeks later. They weren't tourists. They weren't diplomats. They were hardened operatives, men who had once served beside Samuel in battle. They knew him better than anyone. They had seen his strengths, his weaknesses, his patterns of thought. And unlike the FBI, they weren't chasing a mystery. They were hunting a man they had once called brother. The mission was simple but deadly. Track the ghost. Find his safe houses. Predict his moves. And bring him down. At first, Samuel had no idea. He continued his crimes, unaware that the very men who had trained beside him were now on his trail. The soldiers moved quietly, blending into the American cities Samuel haunted. They sat in cafes where he once ate, followed the cars he switched between, and built a map of his network. It wasn't long before they saw the truth. Samuel wasn't just stealing for survival. He was building something bigger. A criminal empire funded by blood and fear. He had men under him, armed and loyal, ready to spill blood at his command. But the soldiers were patient. They studied him. They didn't strike too soon because they knew Samuel was dangerous. One wrong move and he would vanish again. Months passed. Each robbery Samuel pulled seemed more reckless than the last. Each escape more desperate. The soldiers saw the cracks forming. Samuel was powerful but arrogant. And arrogance was the weakness they needed. The final confrontation came in Los Angeles. Samuel had taken refuge in a decaying warehouse on the city's edge. It was fortified like a fortress with armed guards, hidden tunnels, and traps meant to delay intruders. To the FBI it was impenetrable. But to the African soldiers, it was just another battlefield. They struck under the cover of night. Moving with precision, they cut through the outer defenses. Silent takedowns removed Samuel's guards before alarms could be raised. But once inside, the silence broke. Gunfire erupted. The warehouse became a war zone. Bullets tore through walls, flames spread, and the night filled with chaos. Samuel fought like a cornered predator. He used every trick he knew, booby traps, sniper positions, and shadows. He was not running this time. He was ready to kill. But he had forgotten something. The men coming for him knew every tactic he would use, because they had trained him to use them. Every trap he set they anticipated. Every hiding place they remembered. Slowly, methodically, they drove him deeper into the warehouse, cutting off every escape. When Samuel finally realized he was surrounded, he tried one last desperate gamble. A final stand in the heart of the warehouse. Smoke filled the air, sparks fell from broken lights, and the sound of boots echoed on the concrete floor. There, face to face, Samuel met his former commander. The man who had once called him brother. For a moment, the ghost faltered. Memories of the past flashed before his eyes. The battlefields, the brotherhood, the oaths they had once sworn. But the past was gone. The commander leveled his weapon and spoke just one sentence. You ran far but not far enough. With that, Samuel's empire crumbled. His guards were subdued, his weapons seized, and the ghost himself was taken alive. For the first time in years, the man who thought himself untouchable was shackled in silence. When news of his capture broke, the world was stunned. A man who had terrorized cities across America was finally caught, not by the FBI, not by local police, but by 5 soldiers from Africa who had crossed an ocean to bring justice to one of their own. Samuel was extradited and placed on trial. His crimes were laid bare before the world: robberies, murders, smuggling, and conspiracy. The courtroom was silent as victim after victim was named. The families of the dead finally had a face to hold responsible. But beyond the trial, something larger was revealed. Crime no longer lived within borders. Criminals moved like shadows across continents, building empires that governments alone couldn't always stop. And sometimes, justice required alliances that no one expected. The ghost was gone. But his story served as a warning. That even the most cunning, the most ruthless, the most untouchable criminal can never truly outrun justice. Because justice, like the men who hunted him, will follow, no matter how far, no matter how long.